Alright guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So in this episode I'm going to touch on when to pull back when you're in a gaining phase. And the reason being is I think a mistake a lot of people make can potentially be cutting their gaining phase short, stopping their gaining phase when they can still benefit from pushing on. And the opposite applies. Some people potentially don't know when to finish a gaining phase, when to stop it, when it might be counterproductive to keep gaining, when they might not be benefiting from gaining more body weight. So in this episode, like I said, I'm going to touch on when you may want to finish it and when you may want to keep going. A quick update on myself, as I usually do before jumping into the episode. So not a ton's change. I'm 3 weeks post show now, still hungry, slightly less hungry, but also slightly less weak. And training's improving, some areas faster than others, which is good. Which I'm happy with, and my body weight has been pretty stable this week, despite a bit of a spike this morning from an off-plan meal, which is completely fine. When you have foods that are different and eat at different times, your weight will be a wee bit more all over the place, and probably also from eating a bit more calories, which I'm fine with. My body weight didn't even go up last week. If anything, the average dropped, so I think it was somewhat necessary to an extent. Obviously, you don't need to do that for an off-plan meal, or a meal out, or what people refer to as a cheat meal. Probably not the best way to do things, but I had a meal out with my mates, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, training's improving, some areas faster than others, like I said, which is good. And the reason why some areas are just a bit slower than others is just because I've already been performing some movements for a very, very long time and progressing them. So it's hard to, let's say, take a movement that you've progressed a ton and then keep progressing it further when your body weight's very low, if that makes sense. And in terms of the reason for the episode, there can be times when continuing to gain can be detrimental in terms of your progress or what's best to do, like from a muscle growth standpoint. There's also times when continuing to gain can be beneficial and you should keep pushing on, and maybe you shouldn't pull back just yet. So this episode will give you basically knowledge on some things to look out for on when to pull back and when to push on, if that makes sense. And what I'd say is stick in and don't pull back unless you need to. So if everything's going well, then don't change anything that's not broken. So a big mistake I see people make is just spending their time wanting to be lean, or just wasting their time trying to be lean, when their goal is to put on muscle and they want to put on more muscle. And the reason why this isn't a great thing to do is we build muscle best when we are slowly pushing our body weight up, and also when we are slightly less lean than we want to be, I think. And that's why you want to push your body weight up and not just stick at maintenance. So in the early years, that's when you progress the most, so don't waste them switching from, let's say, dieting phase to gaining phase, vice versa, and repeating that process. Instead, stick to a phase and just carry it out, and don't waste your wheels or spin your wheels. Just stay lean. That's my best tip to you, because if let's say you stay lean, yep, you're lean for that period, but if let's say you bulk and then you diet down again, you get to the same body fat the year after, you'll look better than if you just stayed lean for that year, if that makes sense. You'll have more to show for it, and over the long term you'll look better as a result. And in terms of most of these points I'll be making, they might be things you aren't experiencing. But if that is the case, then that just basically gives you the awareness to keep going, and the awareness of there's no reason for yourself to pull back. So you might think, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me, but that tells you you should keep gaining as a result. If none of the things that I'm going to say in terms of things to look out for to pull back don't apply to you, that's a good thing. That means you should keep going, and that gives you the accountability to know, right, I shouldn't pull back, I should keep pushing on. Because it's about just knowing what signs to look out for and having the awareness. But again, if nothing's broke, don't fix it. First thing I'm going to say is just look out for some red warning lights, some red flags, some signs that this is potentially detrimental, and it may be potentially worth thinking about pulling back. And first thing's digestion. So if let's say you're at a point where you've got GI issues, you're having to eat a lot of food, And again, this is not going to happen overnight, but if, let's say, you've got things like excessive gas, bloating, bowel movements are off, you're maybe finding you've got like loose stools. I know it's a bit maybe grim to talk about, but it's something important and not something you should sweep under the rug, especially long term. Like if you've got bad digestion, you're not listening to your body, and you do that years on years, then that's going to wreak havoc on you over time. So if our digestion's off, we don't utilise the food we consume effectively. We are less sensitive to the food we're consuming. But saying that, before instantly stopping a gaining phase because your digestion's not great, there's things you can do to try and improve it, and habits to focus on. So things like your food hygiene, have a look, see how it is. I'm not talking about how clean your food is, so don't go cleaning, don't go trying to wash your fruit and veg before you eat it. Oh, I do that, but that's not what I mean by food hygiene. Food hygiene is basically what's your habits surrounding your nutrition, what's your habits surrounding when you eat your meals like, meaning are you sitting in a relaxed state when you're eating, or are you making sure that when you eat you are like just chilled, you've got your heart rate nice and low, or are you in a rushed state, are you stressed out when you're eating your food, are you not taking time to get off your phone and eat your meals? That's something to look out for. And something else to potentially think about is like when you are eating your food, are you chewing it plenty? Because it might sound straightforward, it might sound like your mum telling you to chew your food, but if, let's say, you're not chewing your food as much as potentially you should, you're not breaking your food down as much in your mouth, which is where the digestive process starts. The digestive process starts actually when you smell food, when you see food, because then you start producing saliva, which basically helps break down food. There's enzymes that help break down the food you're eating. So as soon as you put it in your mouth or smell the food and it smells appealing, then you'll start producing saliva. Hence the saying or the quote, mouth-watering. And what it says, make your food enjoyable, because then you will actually want to eat your meals, you'll chew it more, you'll break it down further, so your stomach's got less of a job to do once you are digesting it, if that makes sense. Make sure you're definitely doing that. That will make a massive impact. And like I said, when we have poor digestion, we don't utilise our food well, meaning we aren't insulin sensitive, or we aren't as insulin sensitive, which basically means the food you consume, you're more likely to store it as body fat than muscle mass. And in terms of what to do as well as that, focusing on your food hygiene habits, before instantly stopping gaining, have a think, what could you potentially do to improve it as well? Like, if, let's say, with your diet, you are consuming foods that are quite processed, quite a lot of crap, you're eating burgers and that all the time that aren't homemade and just rubbish, then that could potentially be why you're having issues. So look at your food choices, but for the most part, a good rule to stand by is trying to get most of your food sources from foods that aren't processed. Like if something's been grown in the ground or killed, like if it's an animal product, then it's probably good for you to an extent. And like the further it goes from being like a natural source of food, it's probably not going to be as great for you to eat, for example. And that's not obviously the case all the time. Like, it's not just because something's healthy, again, doesn't mean it is going to be a good food choice for yourself, because some folk can digest other foods that some people can't. For example, I can't digest dairy very well, meaning like whey protein doesn't sit great, which is why I use whey isolate protein. And also things like yogurt, as much as I love it, doesn't digest great. Same with oats. But things like rice sits very, very well. Same with other rice-based carbohydrate products like ground rice or rice cakes. That sort of thing always sits very well. And same with like bread, no problems there. Everyone's individual, and same with like different fruits and veg. Some people can't digest some as great as others. But what I'd say is, if you are having digestive issues, something that you could consider is look up the high FODMAP diet, meaning FODMAP, FODMAP, because high FODMAP foods can potentially cause digestive issues, and it just shines a light on foods that might be in your diet that might be causing issues that you might not think, oh, this could cause digestive issues. whereas those foods can potentially be healthy, like broccoli. That's a high FODMAP food, but it is really healthy, but it's also prone to cause digestive issues for some individuals. But again, that doesn't mean if you're currently having broccoli that you should take it out immediately. But when you are trying to spot digestive issues, take out one food at a time or change one thing at a time. And the reason being is it allows you to actually see if it's causing issues or not. But if, let's say, you have bad digestion, you change your diet completely, then your digestion improves. You don't actually know what's improved it because you've changed so much things at once. So change one thing at a time, and then it will allow you to assess and actually see why it's an issue. Next up is body fat. So when our body fat gets higher, on paper, we're more likely to gain fat. And the reason being is, again, we're less sensitive to carbohydrates, meaning we're more likely to store them as body fat when our body fat gets higher. But at the same time, saying that, our ability to perform well increases when our body weight's higher. So that is another good reason to push our body weight up. So it's a balancing act. We want to ideally have our body weight up. We ideally want to push our body weight up, but we don't want to do so at an extremely fast rate, or we don't want to get super out of shape, you could say. But yeah, it's a balancing act for sure, because you could stay lean. Yes, you'll not be likely to store body fat, but you will not gain much muscle because you don't have the ability to push your performance up the same when you just stay lean all the time. But on the other hand, if you push your body weight up too fast or too much, you could argue it's detrimental, you could argue you don't need to, and you could also say you don't need to do it that much to support your performance. And in terms of sumo wrestlers, they have the highest level of muscle mass of people in all sports, so that is another good idea to push your body weight up. I'm not saying you should look like a sumo wrestler, but to an extent, weight moves weight. When you are a bigger guy, or bigger female, you can often lose or use more load. You can lift more. And we know a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, or a stronger muscle will be a bigger muscle. So again, it's a balancing act between the two. So that's something to think about. Going on to that is performance. So are you going to benefit from pushing your body weight up further? Meaning, are you going to benefit from, let's say, going from, let's say, 75 to 80 kilograms? Because if, let's say, you started your gaining phase at 65 kilos, your body fat's now high. Let's say the last couple kilos you've gained, you've found not much performance improvements. Then you could say, right, I'm not really benefit from pushing up anymore. My body fat's already really high. So at that stage, you can maybe take a slower rate of gain because you don't need to gain as aggressively. Or you could set a maintenance for a bit and then push on further. Or you could then just, take things slow, or maybe pull back and just perform a dieting phase from there if you feel like it's needed. But again, if we are running movements for a long period of time, generally progress will slow down, meaning you won't be able to progress at the same rate, which is completely fine and completely normal, because it's expected if we are performing movements week in, week out, we're not going to be able to progress them to the same rate. Because when we start a movement, let's say when we do a leg press for the first time, you'll put 20 kilos on a week, maybe 10 kilos on a week, and be able to do that for a few weeks just because it's a new movement. Whereas if, let's say, we've been doing that leg press for a year, we're going to be putting, let's say, 5 kilo plates on, or maybe 2.5 or 1.25 kilo plates on, and that's fine, because you could argue when you've been doing a movement for a year and you get really strong at it, and then you put an additional 5 kilos on, that's going to result in more new muscle than, let's say, doing a movement for the first time then putting 5 kilos on. So don't be worried if progress gets slower, as long as you are creeping forward, as long as you are moving forward every session or two. So it's somewhat expected, because if, let's say, we do have the ability to put 20 kilos on every time we do the leg press, like we do from, let's say, the first to second time we use it, then we will be lifting thousands of kilograms by the time we've been training for a few years. I'm not going to do the maths to see if that would actually work or add up, but I think you get the drift and what I mean. In terms of performance, are you going to benefit from pushing your body weight up further? If not, maybe take things slower, pull back. Another one is cardiovascular fitness. So if, let's say, fitness is really poor, you could maybe look to implement some cardio, and that could help in terms of keeping your ability to perform well in your sets and not gas out in a good spot. And then if that's the case, you've already got cardio in, but you're not finding it's helping, or you're not finding you're performing well still, then you can pull back maybe if needed. Because if, let's say, you aren't performing well because of your body fat being high and being unfit, again, this is probably not going to apply to most individuals, but I just wanted to throw it in there because it could in the future, and something to go out for or think about. Even if, let's say, it's not due to your body fat being high, if you're really unfit and you find on your high rep sets you gas out, then you could maybe look to do some cardio. But when your body weight's generally higher, you're a bit less fit, you gas out a bit quicker in your sets. And that goes on to something else I experienced. So I was getting headaches at the end of one of my gaining phases, which I think is partly due to pushing your body weight up high, like a combination of things. My heart rate and blood pressure are always in a good spot. They weren't too high, but when you're, let's say, your body weight's really high and you're pushing yourself on a really high rep set and you're struggling to breathe, and then your face is going red, I don't know if that's good in terms of, for myself, not getting a exertion headache. Or I'm not sure if any of you have experienced them, but they're not fun. And what I'm basically saying is look out for signs. Like, just because I've not said something in this podcast doesn't mean it might not apply. So look out for some red flags to pull back. But basically, if you don't have any reason to pull back, don't. Keep pushing on, keep gaining, keep getting stronger in the gym and pushing your lifts up, because at the end of the day, that's going to result in new muscle. That's going to result in you being able to progress. But if you're wanting to, let's say, minimise body fat gain, I've got an episode covering things like that. But basically, take things nice and gradual, train hard, sleep well, eat good food, and you'll grow. Hope this helped. And again, like I said, yes, you might gain a bit more body fat. Yes, you might not love the way you look, but long term, that's going to yield more progress in staying lean. So make sure you think long term, because at the end of the day, if, let's say, you commit to a gaining phase and you diet back down, you're going to be glad you've done it. You're not going to be like, oh, I wish I was lean 6 months ago. You're going to think, oh, I'm glad I've done that because I've now got more muscle and I now look better. That's what you're going to be thinking. So think long term. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, share it on your story, leave a rating and review depending on what platform you're listening to this on. And I hope everyone has a great day, evening, weekend, depending on when you're listening to this. But thanks very much for listening.